ultimately, the permanent infrastructure will have to be built by the government or by the other departments who are even otherwise responsible for these kind of facilities. So these were actually some of the projects which were undertaken by Pakistan Army in those areas. So you can see the similar shots with regard to the house construction, etc. Now, to the touchy subject of the detainees. Again, when you're through with the conflict, you have lot many detainees, and usually it's a very delicate situation as to how do you go about dealing with them. So the way we handled this situation was actually to divide them into two groups. The first group is the one which was involved in very, very serious crimes, so there is absolutely no other alternate except to put them into the judicial pipeline. You prepare the cases and take them to the court. That is, though, very difficult, long drawn-out course to take, but I think in the longer run, probably that's the best course to take. But side by side, there are going to be a number of people who are going to be involved in much lesser crimes, but mostly what you're going to find is that they're going to have their minds contaminated by the radical ideology. So what you need to do is, basically, you need to de-radicalize those individuals, and you want to put them back into the mainstream of the society. So the programs or their contents, their nature, their duration is going to differ from country to country, from conflict to conflict, from case to case. But what I can tell you with my own experience is that it can work, and in the longer run, it is much better if instead of prosecuting the minor crimes, you actually decontaminate the individuals and you put them back into the society. But that does not end the responsibility of the armed forces. Now, in certain cases, the armed forces can undertake these programs on their own, but in most of the cases, you will need not only the mandate from the government, you will also need the financial support from the government, but at the same time, you will also need expertise from several professionals to help you undertake this. But after these people, they go out of these programs, so you'll have to continuously monitor them, and in most cases, you will also have to socially, financially support these individuals or these families to stand on their own feet and become useful member of the society. This is also partly the process which can help you actually in social reintegration, because do understand that when a conflict ends, the society is going to be split many ways. And in order for the society to move towards normalcy, you want the warring factions, you want the former enemies to actually draw the curtain on the past and move forward into the future. So I think this process can work towards that end. These are just again some of the shots from our own program, because we also had a speaker in a seminar in SWAT to talk about the de-radicalization program, and Dr. Malkanti, who was referred to, she was a speaker there, and I do understand that Sri Lanka has got its own very, very successful program. Now, towards transfer. Now, some of the things, they do have to take place for the transfer to ultimately happen. The economy has to be up and going, up and running. Then the psychosocial revival of the area of the society is extremely important. What has worked in the case of Swat, Pakistan is that, the leadership over there and the army in particular can help in organizing certain events, certain forums where the people can come together, engage in activities which can lift the spirits of the people and get them engaged with more energy, with more tempo into the positive activities. So I think that's the way where you can give that sufficient momentum to the society to start moving on its own. and army can get a ticket back to the cantonment. However, I'm going to talk about towards the end, towards two things. There is a paradox and there are certain wild cards in this situation. The paradox is that in order for the armed forces to be effective, they need to be visible, they need to be pushing, they need to be upfront when you are undertaking all these activities. But if you continue to do that, the end result is not going to be good. What you have to understand is that there are going to be two streams which have to be parallel. The armed forces stream, to the extent that they can do certain things and they can do certain things well, they have to manage their profile in such a way that while being effective, they do give way to the parallel civilian stream to gain the steam and to take over. Now, this is not going to be one-day process. It's going to depend on the political, the military, and the civilian leadership and the administration in the area to be aware about these issues and very delicately manage these tasks. And ultimately, end of the day, when you actually decide about the complete transition to the civil law enforcement agencies and to the civil administration, by that time, while all these functions they are being performed by the civil administration, the military has to bow out from the scene. Wildcards. First of all, media. Now, it's a very, very delicate subject, but from my personal experience, I can tell you it can be either a force multiplier during the transition, and it can also become a handicap for you. And believe me, you don't really want to be on the left side of the media. There are several ways of handling the media. I'm not even an expert on this. I don't want to get into the issue. But what I would like to say is that you will have to somehow engage with the media on such a frequency that you are able to take an advantage from their positive engagement. Because on the other hand, somehow, because of any reason, if you manage to annoy the media, believe me, your 3 months, 6 months, very positive effort can be ruined by just one article or one clip. NGOs, you have them all kinds. There are going to be good NGOs, there are going to be bad, and believe me, there are going to be NGOs which are going to be worse than that. What we have to understand is that state has got tremendous potential when it engages into a developmental activity. NGOs, no matter what, they simply cannot compete with the state. And to the extent that they positively interact with the state in the conflict area, and they are able to reinforce the efforts, they can be very effective. They can, at the micro level, they can do a lot. But you have to understand their capacities, their positives, their negatives. But on the whole, if the armed forces in the area of responsibility, if they are able to engage positively with the NGOs, they can act as force multipliers for you. Natural disaster. I hope nothing of the kind happens. Definitely not in Sri Lanka, but since I experienced it, last year in Swat, we had unprecedented floods. Now, this is the kind of wild card which can actually disturb the whole dynamics of a post-conflict situation. It can really disturb the security equation. It can upset your developmental trajectory and so on. So should that happen, one needs to keep the balance, restore the earlier momentum, and move on. Diaspora. I'm sure a lot has been said about this. In this, what we have to understand is that it can affect the post-conflict situation in many ways. Many ways. Of course, I mean, the diplomatic dimension and the political dimension is going to be tackled by the state, by the government, by the political leadership. But what can be done in the conflict area by the armed forces leadership is that with regard to their consumers, who are basically the people in the conflict area. So they are the ones actually with whom, if you engage on a positive note, so those consumers, they can be weaned away from their leadership or their linkages which are residing abroad. But this is only in the political dimension. But then in certain cases, there are also going to be some financial implications. So in that case, the armed forces will have to get back to the relevant departments and the agencies in the government to take care of those linkages. But believe me, if you want to bring the stability, those linkages, they will have to be severed. External linkages. I'm sure you understand what I mean by this. A lot many external linkages, they have been talked about by the earlier speakers. They're actually the wild cards. They can negatively impact on the situation. In certain cases, in those lucky circumstances, there could also be some positive influence. But then when I talk about the linkages, it of course also takes into account the regional situation, the global linkages, etc. Lastly, borrowing from former Secretary Rumsfeld, there are going to be unknown unknowns. Nothing that we know today or we talk about, it can happen. It can happen. So essentially, the message over here is that while in a position of leadership, when you are tackling with a post-conflict scenario, retain the balance, retain a flexible mind, do not be upset by smaller negative events. They have to be taken in stride, and still the main course, the main trajectory has to be followed. It has to be kept. Lastly, what's the end state when you talk about the role of armed forces in the post-conflict scenario? Well, if this is the kind of scene which happens when the army goes back to the cantonment or to the garrisons, when the people in the area, they can happily wave you goodbye, I think you would have done the job. So that's why when I said that it's extremely important for the political leadership to choose the moment of transfer of responsibility. You stay a week, a month, a year, more than that, people are going to be fed up with you, and your stay is going to become counterproductive. There is going to be law of diminishing returns which is going to set in. So you don't really want to do that. And a month earlier, a few months earlier, then I think you would have done it prematurely. But of course, this is a judgment call by the political leadership. But should this happen at the right moment and the right way, I think then that's the best way, because that's the right time for the civilian leadership to take over, and that's the right time for the armed forces to say goodbye, thank you, and go back to the barracks. Well, with that, I'm going to end my speech, and I'm just hoping I have not overshot by a lot of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, GenJaved.